Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, HOA tried to steal a farmer's property even though he never joined the HOA, big mistake. Summary. Farmer decides to seek revenge his own way after the neighboring HOA harasses him for too long, even threatening to sue him for nothing. With compost piles and gun ranges, this farmer has really shown them who was not to be messed with. I come from generations of farmers in my home of South Africa. I have been watching over the years as modern buildings and neighborhoods have popped up, taking over precious farmland. I hate to see it happen, but I know that it is just a normal part of life. However, when this takeover of neighborhoods and their HOAs started to affect my life and property, I realized just how bad it really was. I ended up having my adjacent land purchased by a large neighborhood contracting company. It took about a year for them to have the first few houses up, and it was only a matter of time before people started moving in and their soul-sucking HOA board became established. My home and property are clearly not part of their neighborhood, land or jurisdiction, but boy was it only a few weeks before someone was knocking on my door. There was a woman and a man, dressed nicely with a leather folder of papers. They seemed professional and like they wanted to talk business. I wasn't interested in what they were selling though. These individuals introduced themselves as 2 of 5 HOA board members, the woman being the leader of the group. They wanted to discuss purchasing my large 10-acre field that was south of their neighborhood. I, of course, told them no. They weren't happy to hear that and pursued the issue for several more minutes until I firmly stated that it wasn't going to happen. With a forced face, the woman nicely said that it was my wish and she would be available if I changed my mind. I could tell that she was fuming on the inside, but she managed to hold it together pretty well. I thought that nothing else would really come from the issue, so I was surprised when I received some letter in the mail from the HOA board. They were claiming that my property was extending beyond the actual property line and that I would have to shorten it by about 5 acres. At the time, all I could think about was how that couldn't be possible, and I was certainly right. It's not possible. I ignored their letters, and by the end of the week I had another letter, this time more threatening and actually mentioning legal action. I'm not very good at understanding the law. I've always kept to myself and never assumed I'd be in a position where I needed a lawyer. Did I need a lawyer? I wasn't even sure what to do, so I called my friend Steve, who was willing to help me out. He worked for his father's law firm for years and almost became a lawyer before he found his passion in carpentry. Steve told me the best thing to do is to just ignore them. They had no jurisdiction and I knew where my property line ended. I heeded his advice and disregarded their letters, and after about the 6th or 7th one that I threw in the trash, I started to realize that they were coming more often. Whoever was writing these letters was a certified crazy person. The intimidation tactics were ridiculous and they even threatened authorities. I just had a hard time even believing that people can be this crazy and entitled. They said that I was part of the HOA, never signed shit, and that I had to follow rules and other stuff that was just weird and impossible. This HOA felt like they were owed the courtesy of my land because they had money to throw at me and I was apparently some dumb farmer. Well, I'll show them what happens when they mess with me. My son gave me a great idea one day. He said that I should build a compost pile by the entrance of the neighborhood. I know that he was joking, but I genuinely think that it's perfect. Not only would I build 1 compost pile, but I'd build 2. I started just working on the project right away. I grabbed up the straw, leaves, scraps from my kitchen compost bin and old vegetables from the garden. I needed way more than this to build something substantial though, so I started having my friends, family and non-HOA neighbors bring their compost scraps and toss them in the pile. It even became a thing people stopped by for over a week-long period. Compost piles aren't that fast to put together. Not to mention the chicken poop that my chicken farmer neighbor brought by. The 2 piles popped up faster than I could imagine with my friend's help, and it didn't take any time before I heard from the HOA about it. They sent a very colorful letter stating that the compost piles were grounds for suing me. That they were a disturbance to the entire neighborhood. My revenge wasn't going to stop there. I decided that I would keep going until they finally left me alone. There was another large field that I owned that had issues with flooding, so I rarely planted any crops that far back. It faced the rear of the neighborhood and she had hinted about wanting to purchase that area of land so they could continue to expand for more houses. At least that's what she said at the first schmooze meeting she tried to pull off. My son and I and many of his friends have enjoyed collecting and shooting guns. We don't really hunt because we can't stand the idea of shooting an animal, even for sport or necessity. He had been talking with me for the last 2 years about opening up a gun range in the back of the property, the part that floods and I don't use for crops. He wanted to level it and build up an office and gun range, probably opening it to the public once we got all the paperwork ready. I figured with all of this HOA nonsense going on and their constant harassment, it was as good a time as any to start the process of opening up the gun range business. It was a chunk of change for me and my son to put down right away, but it ended up being incredibly lucrative in the long run. But let me say that the HOA was pissed. I mean, if this woman could burn me and my house to the ground, she would. After just 24 hours of us using the gun range, it wasn't even really built yet either, we were just shooting. She came tearing down the road to my property in her nice Mercedes and was absolutely fuming again. I couldn't help but laugh at her red face and screwed up hair as she tried to use her intimidation tactics on me. When she realized that her yelling and belligerent wasn't going to get her anywhere, she started a new tactic of crying on my front porch. I decided to close the door in her face, to which I could then hear her shouting and kicking my door. She carried on for several minutes before leaving, eventually breaking a pot I had on the porch and kicking some of my flower beds over. I thought about being petty and calling the cops for her destroying my belongings, but it wasn't worth the trouble. I proceeded to continue opening up the gun range to the public. The local gun club even decided to host their meetings there. Not only does the gun range make lots of noise, disturbing the shitty HOA, sorry to the residents I guess, but it's also making me quite a bit of money. It's even going to allow me to retire early from farming. I might end up selling my property one day, but it's definitely not going to be this shitty HOA and its spoiled brat of a board leader. The next story is titled, "Yeah, you guys take care of it." This is yet another entry into my fast food chronicles. I believe this is one of the first times I'm writing about people I rarely see, day shift. There once was a time I knew very little about day shift, but one day I got to appreciate the different requirements. Not more, not less, just different. I covered for a week for the boss. Fodder for later. So a month passes by, I'm back to my usual nighttime drive-through duties and the Drew and I are noticing that we're doing way more work than usual. We're coming into our shift to a dirty, horrible, unstocked mess. Every night we come in. We say something to Alberto, the store manager. He says that he'll have a talk with them. It changed for literally a day, then back to the usual mess of extra piles of dishes, garbage bags full of morning garbage, just absolute, unsanitary bedlam. One day I come in a couple hours early to cover for the front counter. It's this time that I run into Scott, the day shift supervisor. The man whose court dates, daughters' names, and ex-wife's name are things everybody knows, and not because any of us asked. The man who has a twang in his voice for no reason, he's from Ohio. The bane of my existence. I let him know that his crew keeps leaving us with extra work. This isn't our first conversation, so I kept the conversation hyper-focused. He quips back, "Yeah, how about you guys take care of it? Y'all do the same shit, we very don't. Want us to take care of it? We'll take care of it." Enter malicious compliance. I know for a fact that the next time Alberto will be making his orders. I decide to take every bag of garbage, every unwashed dish, every unflattened box, and make a collection of it. The rest of the crew helps me with this, and I even reject a few donations to the pile because it's a dish we're going to use too. Dirty egg cooker cups, the works we add to this monstrosity. I put it in front of the front door, inside the restaurant, but you can't walk in without moving boxes. I leave a note saying, "Scott says night crew needs to take care of all of this, done." Now what I hadn't planned on was that this particular order or count was something the GM was here for, and the GM was the first to see it. I wasn't there to see his reaction, but I was very surprised that not only did I still have a job, but Scott lost his. Technically a demotion, but he wasn't the day shift go-to anymore. All of a sudden things got a better, and over the time I found that it was all the dirty egg cookers that set the GM off. The next story is titled, "Just pull up front, will do." Last year, I was visiting my parents. My mom ordered bags of potting soil from Lowe's, and asked if I'd drive her down there to pick it up. I happily obliged. When we arrived, we parked in a spot marked for online ordering pickup. My mom phoned the store, and told the person who answered that we were there to pick up the order. Instead of the staff bringing the bags to the vehicle and loading them up, the person on the phone told us to just drive up to the front of the garden department. As the call was on speaker, I asked the person simply, "Where up front?" "Just pull up front," was the reply. Mildly irritated, I pointed out that "up front" was vague, as there's a whole lotta up front outside of a store. Just pull up front. Just pull up in front of the garden department. So, now I'm irritated. I had a smaller SUV, so I decided to comply with the person's request, maliciously. I pulled up to the garden department, then proceeded to back my vehicle as far into the garden department as I could. This location has registers right outside, and after customers pay, they roll about 40 feet out into the parking lot. I managed to get close enough to the register that I could still open the hatch on the back of my vehicle. A woman comes running out from behind a register, yelling, "You can't back in here like this. I told you to pull up front." I replied, "Ma'am, I asked you twice where to park up front. I'm now parked in front of the garden department. Here's the order number. Other customers can't leave with carts because now there is not enough room to squeeze a cart around my vehicle." The woman working there was obviously flustered. She points to an area just off to the right of the exit and tells me she wanted me to go there. "Ah, I'm sorry, I didn't practice my mind reading skills this morning. Just load us up and we'll be on our way," was my reply. After everything was loaded up, I leaned out of my window, gave a slow, broad smile and said, "Sorry about the confusion," and drove away. The next story is titled, My Dad's Cousin's Ex. Let me tell you a story. My dad's cousin, she's in her late 70s early 80s. Well, she was married to a super high up of some big company. They had 2 kids but had a wonderful prenup. It was ironclad. Where if they divorced she got nothing, but what was acquired during marriage, and he paid child support. If she cheated she forfeits everything but child support. If he cheated, he had to pay her alimony and child support until she got remarried. No matter what she made, it was set that she got $5,000 a month alimony. After the kids were 18 her alimony went down to $2,500 if she still was unmarried. The man was loaded. Well, he cheated and she got proof. Actually his boss caught him and liked her, so he told her, even testified to it, plus he didn't deny it in court. He was having an affair with his young secretary. So she got alimony and child support. Well, years later, after she finished cosmetology school, she ended up opening her own hair salon in the South. She has a lot in those upscale assisted living facilities, so now she's also loaded. She drives a super cute red convertible Mercedes. Well, they divorced when she was 30. She still has never remarried, he's still paying alimony. She has had a serious boyfriend for 30 years, but she said just to spite the ex she will not remarry unless he dies. So he has been married 4 more times, but no matter what, because of his prenup, he insisted on, she still gets that $2,500 a month. Well, for at least 40 to 45 years so far he's been paying. She said after what he did to her, making her give up her dreams and sign a prenup, she was going to make him pay. She did eventually go finish school and follow her dreams after the kids were grown. She has. She's the nicest person too. His other wives get nowhere near that. He made sure his prenup granted them nothing but child support. Also, her boyfriend and her don't live together, they have been neighbors for years. They both want their own space. He also has his own money. She doesn't even need her ex's money and just puts it in an account for her grandkids' colleges. She also likes to donate some to women's shelters. She donates it in his name so he gets notifications or notes that money was donated in his name. She says the day he dies she and her boyfriend will go to the courthouse. Everyone in the family knows, and every time we see her my father laughs and says, "So the ex still alive and paying?" The last story is titled, My Neighbor Thinks I'm Her Doorman. I, 26, live on the ground floor of a block of flats that has a security door, so if you don't have a key, you need to be buzzed in. For the last month or so, one of my neighbors, female 30s, on the top floor has lost her key and has still to replace it, so instead she presses my buzzer to be let in. The first couple of times she did it, I let her in because I hate the sound of the buzzer. When I have people over, I will go out just before they arrive and open the door so they don't need to buzz in, and to be somewhat neighborly. Well, This has now led to her pressing my buzzer every time that she wants to come back in. I've taken to ignoring her when she buzzes my door. It's not my fault she doesn't have a key, and it's not my job to let people in. Because of this, she's taken to holding my buzzer in or pressing it several times before giving up and getting someone else to let her in. The other day, after having ignored her for about 5 minutes, she even came up to my living room window and looked in to see if she could spot me, and that was the last straw for me. The next night, I put up a sign saying that whoever was doing it, could they stop because it's not my job to be the doorman, and that set her off. She went outside and started shouting and swearing at my window. My blinds were down but some light from a lamp was bleeding through. That I wasn't being very neighborly and that I was purposefully leaving her outside in the cold. We live in Scotland and she chose to go out in just a jumper, and even lifted up my letterbox to moan at me when she did get in. About an hour ago, which prompted me to write this, she went out and started holding down my buzzer and moaning that I had to let her in because she was freezing. Edit. I am planning on reporting her to police via the non-emergency line. I just wanted to share this. Also, I don't know if she owns or rents, so I don't know if there's a landlord to speak to. I rent from my stepdad who owns the unit I live in. Edit 2. I really doubt my stepdad would be able to do anything as he doesn't know anyone in the building, let alone if any of the other flat are owned by landlords. And my buzzer does have a silent setting, however it doesn't work. Thank you for listening.